Our minds can change our perceptions very, very powerfully. So when the spiritual teacher says the world is illusion, what they really mean is your world that you're creating in your mind only exists in your mind. It's an illusion. It doesn't exist out there. And so that's that shift from conditioned mind to unconditioned consciousness. That's what enlightenment's all about. That's what it's about. To shift from perceiving through our own conditioning of our minds and thoughts and ideas and beliefs, to perceive through those is leads to one type of consciousness. It's usually called egoic consciousness, perceiving through ego. But really, it's probably more truthful to say perceiving through your mind. And then not perceiving through your mind. Just perceiving directly. Seeing things as they are. Seeing you as what you are. Seeing everything, everybody, as what it actually is. That's basically what enlightenment is. Of course, usually enlightenment is sold through, this is how you'll feel once that has happened. Right? Usually there's a big sales ploy. You know, it's like trying to entice people into enlightenment by saying you will be really happy. You will feel lots of bliss. You will never have a problem again. Yeah. You've all heard the sales pitch for enlightenment, right? I mean, you get in spirituality very long, but you know, the sales pitch is different depending on who's pitching it. You know, maybe it will. Now, what if the sales pitch was, here's something that you'll get nothing out of. You'll put all your energy into, you put all your life into, you put all of your heart and your soul and your bones and your marrow into, and when it's all said and done, you'll get goose egg. Right? It's like going to a great restaurant and ordering the best thing on the menu, and they bring you an empty plate. Not many people are going to be really thrilled with that, are they? So if I was, which I'm not, but if I was to make a sales pitch for enlightenment, that would be my sales pitch. So, I mean, to say that you get nothing out of it is just as silly as to say you'll get everything out of it. But the trajectory and the interest that really this thing, this big word, which is unfortunate we're stuck with, but if we change the word, we just ruin that word too. You know, it doesn't matter what word we use. This big word of enlightenment, it is the perception of truth, which is just seen with unclouded vision. That's what it is. Seeing what is instead of what isn't. Have you ever had the experience of being very much in a pattern of thinking? You ever had something that you really deeply believed and felt very passionate about? Right? Very, very, this is what's true. And then at some other later point in your life, you saw that was total and absolute nonsense. And then you look back and you think, how did I ever believe that? Remember that experience? Like, how did I ever think that was what was real, that was actually true? And you're just mystified. But you remember when you really perceived things through that lens, that everything looked different, didn't it? The whole world was the same. It was just like it always was. But the way you saw it was totally different, right? And then you stop believing in it at some point, and the world looks different again. It looks very different without that belief. More than likely you're perceiving through a new belief, but nonetheless, that's sort of an example, or that little taste of how potent our minds can change our perceptions. Right? Our minds can change our perceptions very, very powerfully. So when the spiritual teacher says the world is illusion, what they really mean is your world that you're creating in your mind only exists in your mind. It's an illusion. It doesn't exist out there.
this concept that the world is not, well, that God didn't create the world, I have to say that is also, in my opinion, a Wapnickian interpretation. Now, there are various teachers who say that there are different interpretations of that, so I just want to make that very clear. And also, I like to say that the Course does say, obviously, as well, that, you do not deny the body, you do things in the body, you do have to go through the body to access the higher levels. But I know where you're coming from, because I too do have sometimes grapple with the somewhat theoretical presentation of the Course. It doesn't relate very well to the forms of magic, as you said.
Yes, and so, for example, the idea that when I'm watching a beautiful sunset, or I'm the idea that somehow the fundamental unity of existence and God and reality, that somehow that cannot include a beautiful sunset, that somehow there's not an authentic unity there, that there cannot be an authentic personal essence. These are ideas that do not resonate with my experience. My experience is that once you are free of the egoic interpretation of experience, that there is experience that can be had as a personal essence in this world that is completely authentic. And that is where I have a metaphysical difference with the foundations of the Course as I understand it. But more important than the intellectual discussion of the differences of viewpoint, what I'm more concerned about is what I see in people who study the Course, many of them, in terms of what I see is the implication of these ideas and how it shows up in people's lives who are studying the Course. Mm-hmm. I see very often an unconsciousness or a relative unimportance put on things like the body or one's emotional authenticity or one's clarity of logical thought or the importance of making a living. Many of the things that I see Course students deal with can be correlated with some of these the way some of these ideas can be interpreted. And so my concern isn't just an academic concern. My concern is from observation of human beings who are exposed to the Course. And for me, I have found that for me to get the most value out of the Course, I've needed to be with it in certain ways and integrate it with other points of view and other skills and abilities that have helped to have it work for me more fully. And so in my own life and in my own teachings, I integrate it with theories and practices from transformational studies and also from my knowledge, my extensive knowledge of the healing arts, of helping to balance body structure, body biochemistry, subtle bodies, emotionally, energetically based emotional clearing work. All of these things I have found very, very helpful in helping people to access the truths that the Course is pointing to, and then also helping people to be able to take that possibility that the Course represents and transform it into authentic personal self-expression.
Okay. Do you want to talk a little bit about this work that you do, this transformational healing? Did you say?
Well, I was saying that my work, as I understand it today, I mean, my understanding of my work is constantly evolving, but the but the clearest way I can express it today is that it is a unique synthesis of healing, different forms of healing work combined with transformational work in a context that embraces non-dualism in the sense of acknowledging the fundamental oneness of spirit, and that any absolute assertion of separation is an illusion. And so my work is really a synthesis of those things. I find a lot of what is out there now in terms of spiritual teachers or spiritual teachings, I actually find them very boring. And what I find boring about it is that so many people, from my perception, are talking about things that they have heard or read. They're not talking about their own living presence.
Now, David, my concern now, if for people looking and watching this video, what you just said is a whole, it's very high level theory. So I want to get to what it is you actually do. Like, give us an example of what you actually do. Like, a person comes with you in a room, has, say, a problem with her spouse. I mean, what do you? I know it's very hard then. But okay. you get a sense of what I would like to flesh out in an interview rather than just talking about it on a high-level, theoretical level.
So you're wanting to know what it might look like and sound like if somebody came to me?
Yes.
Okay. So if somebody came to me, we would either be in person or we would usually be on the telephone or in Skype, and we would be communicating. And my philosophy is very much influenced by the late Stephen Covey. Are you familiar with him?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love his work, yeah.
And one of his most powerful ideas is skill number 5 of the 5th habit, which is seek to understand before you seek to be understood. And so this is something that is one of the guiding principles of my life. And so the way that shows up when I'm with people is I usually start out by asking a very open-ended question and see what direction the person takes that question and how they speak and what kind of energy I'm picking up. So I usually start out with a very open-ended question like, what brings you here today? How might I be of some help to you? And then I just listen. I'm listening on many levels. I'm listening to the content. I'm listening to the energy. I'm listening on very deep levels. And based on where they take that question, it begins sort of a journey of communication. And then the questions get a little more specific, or they deepen, or we go on a tangent, we'll come back. And at some point in the process, it's hard to describe, Ken, unless you or your audience is very energetically sensitive. But at some point in the process, usually about 10, 15 minutes into that process, something clicks for me. And I know things. I know that I know things at that point. And I'll have a very strong knowingness about not only asking a particular question, but also getting very clear guidance about a suggested direction to go in or a suggested action to take. And at that point, I will either take that action or make that recommendation and see how the person responds to that. And then the dance continues. But the essence of it is that I'm listening and I'm inquiring and I'm being very present on many levels, multidimensionally at the same time. And at some point, something clicks for me and I have a knowingness and I have faith in that knowingness. And then I move with that and I get permission to move with that with the client or with the patient. And then things could go in many, many, many different directions or or different combinations of directions.
Okay. I understand that. It's very intuitive, these kind of things. And I fully understand the difficulty of expressing what it is that you actually do, because I do realize a lot of modalities do not have the language to express themselves yet, as you were saying.
The essence of my work is not captured in any formula or recipe or modality. And I use a lot of modalities with a lot of precision and a lot of respect for the modality. But the essence of my work is the possibility of the relationship. At the deepest level, is not my circumstances, is not my story, is not my history, is not any particular viewpoint, is not any particular experience. Who I am essentially is the love that I am. And the love that I am, for me, is essentially a space of possibility for a new possibility for human beings. So I'm going to say that again. So for me, this is real for me. Who I am fundamentally is the love that I am. And that love shows up in my relationships with human beings as being or holding a space of possibility for a new possibility for human being. And so living as that possibility of a new possibility, that is the essence of my work. And within that essence, the process that gets set in motion with each individual is very unique to that particular moment, to that particular relationship, to that particular individual. But my prime directive, if you like Star Trek, my prime directive, my prime commitment is to being that space of possibility, of a new possibility for that human being. And within that space, what needs to arise, arises. And one of two things arises. Either the presence of truth arises, or the blockages to the awareness of the presence of truth begins to arise. And either one of those is absolutely perfect, because that's exactly what needs to happen. And my knowingness that that is perfect, my non-resistance and non-judgment of that process, combined with the focus that I bring to the interaction, provides a very unique space or a very unique possibility for that human being that they may likely never have been in the presence of that possibility before.
So you're opening minds, basically.
I would say that I'm inviting people to begin to question that which they have heretofore lived as if it were true. That may not be true. Because to me, that is the essence of the spiritual path. The essence of the spiritual path is the openness to identify and to accept and to take responsibility for and to forgive and to be grateful for seeing, and then eventually to release that which is false or limiting that you have heretofore lived as if it were true. That no matter what form the spiritual path takes, if you look at the essence of what is occurring beyond the form, I say that you will see, if you look deep enough, that what I'm saying is accurate. That if only the truth is true, then the spiritual path must be the awareness and the release of that which is false that we have been living as true.
Yeah, I understand.
Because if we had done all that already, there would be no path. We would just be truth, knowing that we were truth, and there would be no path. We would just be. So by definition, to me, it's axiomatic that if we still sense ourselves to have those blockages, or have a sense that something is not the fullness, the flow, that in my experience, no matter what form the the spiritual teaching takes. In my experience, if it's a true teaching, and by true teaching I mean a teaching that can take you all the way, that its essential nature is that it creates a possibility. It's a space of possibility for one to discover what I call the superstitions that one has been living. And by superstitions, I mean something that you have been living as true that is really false.
This reminds me of the left go method. Are you familiar with the left go method?
No. But I know that Lefko was influenced a lot by one of my teachers, which is Werner Erhard. And
do you want to tell us a bit about Werner Erhard?
Sure. But Werner, I consider my two main teachers to be Werner Erhard and Yeshua, sometimes known as Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And so Werner Erhard, without going into his story, the essence of Werner's teaching is what I call transformation. And transformation is a method of inquiry and a way of being with those questions that naturally unfolds a process where that which has been lived as true without being questioned now can be examined. And through that process, if you are committed enough, you will eventually get to the place where non-dual teachings are attempting to point to, which is you will begin to know yourself beyond circumstance, beyond story, beyond explanation, beyond time, beyond space, beyond experience, and you will begin to know yourself as this infinite possibility, as this infinite spaciousness. And then transformation then asks the question, well, now that you know that, what does that mean for you in this world as a human being? And then transformation invites you to create a space to live into by taking a stand rather than living into the egoic structure of thought that most of us live into.
Kind of reminds me of Byron Katie's, the work of Byron Katie, is it true? Is it really true?
I think the first part of transformation has elements of what you're pointing at with Byron's work. But then there is this second aspect of the work, which is once you have this more spacious quality of beingness, then how do you empower yourself as a human being to focus that potentiality into creative and productive activity as a human being in this world? So there's that aspect of transformation as well. And what's interesting is that if you really push transformation really hard, if you really commit to it totally and really live in that possibility for years like I have, you realize that it really does take you to that same place as the non-dual teachings. But many people who would say that they're committed to transformation, who haven't taken it that far, are not able to tap that possibility.
Mm-hmm.
But if you really take it all the way, it takes you to that same infinite spaciousness. But then what I like about transformation is that it also acknowledges that infinite spaciousness can be expressed authentically into this world.
So to put it in your words, what are we transforming into every given moment?
Well, I can't answer the question the way you posed it. I don't feel like we're transforming into something.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like I am this and now I'm that.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like that for me.
Mm-hmm.
For me, transformation is many things. It's a possibility. It's a commitment. It's a process. And it's sort of like, how familiar are you with either some of the different sects of Buddhism or Sufism?
Maybe Buddhism. I don't know.
Okay.
I'm not a big scholar.
Okay, so in Buddhism is a big set there. There's all sorts of different sects in Buddhism that emphasize different aspects of and qualities of the path.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some sects of Buddhism that emphasize mostly this unwinding process to get back to that nothingness,
Mm-hmm.
to get back to that infinite spaciousness beyond identity, beyond beyond persona,
Mm-hmm.
beyond form.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some schools that basically imply that that is it, that is the goal of the path. And then there are other schools of Buddhism that go, no, wait a minute. That's really just the complete beginning. There are other schools of Buddhism that go, once you access that infinite spaciousness, that's when the fun can really start. That's when life can, as a human, can really begin to become authentic. And there are some schools of Buddhism, or in Sufism, it's very popular to talk about that the ultimate goal of the path is to become an authentic human being functioning in time and space, but not of time and space.
Mm-hmm.
And what I like about transformation is that if you really understand it deeply, it embodies all of that.
David, this is an interesting angle. I didn't expect it to go this way, but I'm thinking about personal development now. You know, the field of personal development, and certainly I loved Stephen Covey. He was a big influence in my life for a long time. How do you see the field of personal development with regards to all that we're saying?
Well, for me, most of personal development is simply going to lead to more suffering, because the fundamental issue of separation and the fundamental issue of the ego thought structure is never examined. So for most people, it just ends up being a more sophisticated adaptation and compensation within the ego's thought system.
Mm.
Now, with that being said, if you recontextualize it, and this is where my work comes in. This is it, Ken. My work creates a space of possibility for people to not be limited by those structural limitations within the personal growth model, and then allows people to take advantage of the strategies and techniques within those models without the ontological limitations of those models.
Did you get frustrated in explaining yourself to other people?
Well, this is the most challenging part of my life.
Yeah, I can tell. Because
the most challenging part of my life is to language this possibility. My work, as far as I can tell in this life, is to embody and to language and to anchor this possibility, this synthesis into this world during this time-space dimension now.
David, tell us about the institute that you intend to set up.
Well, I want to set up an institute that addresses what you're pointing at, that this is so cutting edge that it needs to be anchored into the world. And the word institute, that's what I mean. By establishing an institution, this possibility can get anchored into the world so that it can exist in a way that thoughtful people like yourself, who sense the possibility of this synthesis, can say, hey, David, you know, I get it. I'm getting this, and I really want to master this. how can I master it?
Can't you do that by writing a book or setting up a process? Is it not the same?
No, I've discovered that a book cannot do this, that there's something about the spoken word that carries a certain power. Like, that's the reason I wanted to have this conversation, because obviously someone like yourself, who is very motivated, very bright, has a lot of background, you can see that even someone like yourself, that this is a stretch, that you have to be really available to this possibility. So you can imagine if for someone like yourself, this is a stretch, you can imagine that for many people, there has to be a lot of preparatory material, a lot of discussions that lay the foundation for this discussion, a lot of practices. There are things in the healing arts that can help. There are things in transformational studies that can help. There are things in non-dualistic studies that can help. There are many, many things that can help people to be able to be open to even glimpsing this possibility, because the average person who is being run by the ego thought system, this possibility is going to be either unfathomable or it's going to be terrifying. And so there needs to be a bridge, because if you're going to help someone, you have to build a bridge from the way their world is occurring for them to where you want to guide them. And so the Institute would be designed to reach out and then build that bridge, and then to be a pilot project to demonstrate the efficacy of this new possibility.
Yeah, I like that. I'm very left brain, you see. I want results. And I think at the end of the day, it doesn't work. What does it do for the individual? If I give you, 50 people.
I was going to say, this is what has inspired me, because I've had the privilege of having a living laboratory, of being a doctor for the last 25 years, of being a healer and a teacher for the last 37 years. I've had this amazing privilege of a living library, to be in the presence of applying these ideas and being in the presence of miracles on a consistent basis. This is why I know that I'm not an egomaniac. This is why I know that I'm speaking from reality, that I'm speaking from having been in the presence of thousands of miracles.
David, you're a very unique individual.
Could you say more about that?
Being a unique individual?
Yeah, say more about that.
Well, you strike me as extremely right brain person.
Right brain?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
I had a lot of trouble with your language, and that happens to me with very right brain people, or people who speak in a language of their own. I can't access, and I'm afraid that that's kind of like, okay, so what are we talking about here? Why are we wasting our time here? But then I guess you started talking about the possibility of more possibilities, and is this true? And I could see the truth in that. I got a intuitive hit there. So I didn't utterly dismiss what you were saying, but my concern is to help you to communicate to your audience in presenting what it is that you have to say, which is exactly what we're doing here.